So I was watching a TikTok about someone talking about afro pessimism in the interview with one of the most prominent afro pessimists, and apparently he had a white wife. And I have not yet leaned into the study of afro pessimism. That's the next track on my research journey. But I think it's just interesting, like the concept of interracial relationships and like my experience with being someone who it's not that I like don't care about someone's like racial background, but I've been open to dating people of many different racial backgrounds. And one thing I find interesting is actually how it ties into like my like thoughts on like the sense of self and how most people kind of like associate like people's identity with the version of the person they see immediately before them. And like just kind of like dismiss the potentiality of other realities just based on what's right in front of their face. Especially like when it comes to the like culture around like black people dating outside of their race. Because I'm not even gonna hold you. Yeah, that shit is sus. It is sus. That shit. Every time I like walk into it hopeful, and then we get to a dynamic where it's like, I don't know about all this. And then I just start suggesting books to them, type shit like, uh. Start sending TikToks like, maybe, you know. It's always kind of like important for me to be in a connection where people are like open to expanding their worldview. And I find that like not just with like, with like regardless of race, because I got a whole lot of weird shit going on. I just think it's interesting because I'm not about to be like it would be very disingenuous for me to be like, there's no problem with people in interracial relationships. But like, I don't necessarily think like black love solves everything. Um, Especially like um, with my identity as a black person, um, who's like alternative, I guess. Um, it's like I have to like the fucking cream of the crop, the ideal the ideal like we understand each other on the basis of like sharing the same racial dynamic and et cetera, is a neurodivergent alternative queer black um, social media influencer um, who has lived in more than one or two states. Such a narrow lens for me to find love if I'm looking for people who match my entire um inter like sectional experience, coming on top of the fact that I've spent time in academia um and on the streets, and so it's like I understand this feeling that like, okay, white people are not going to understand what it means to be black. But sometimes sometimes it's really hard to find a black person who understands all the other aspects of my identity too. Not to say it's not impossible, because I be fucking, I be finding them. But I feel like, you know, when it comes to a lot of these like philosophical um, like case studies around like race, they tend to get flattened to a degree where um, I think it really minimizes the other aspects of our humanity, um, and like what it means to meet people on all sides of ourselves. You know, being black is a huge part of my identity. And like honestly, if I'm with a white person who's like not up to like at least getting like a intellectual understanding of what that means, they don't last very long. Um, but and this is like so, and part of the reason why I didn't want to stitch that video is because the person that she was reading the interview about, I was like, nah, I don't associate with that nigga. He was like, oh yeah, my white wife is my master and I am her slave. It's like, wow, wow. In an academic interview? Okay, bro. Oh, I'm not gonna kink shame you, but I am kink acknowledging it. Shit. Like, okay, because that's like also a huge dynamic in a lot of these connections, and it's hard to ignore like the history of slavery being so sexual, like being so sexual. Like it's hard to like communicate that on this platform. Like if we were face to face, I would get nasty with it. But like I'm trying to be so mindful of the community guidelines. But that was a part of the spectacle and a huge part of it was just the mating. And it wasn't just like, oh, we're mating to get more slaves. It's like, no, we're mating for the misses, and we're mating for the master too, and how those dynamics have kind of like become a part of our cultural identity too. It's something that like when I'm like in a connection, I'm mindful of, and that kind of helps me check my boundaries and stuff because it can get real weird real fast. And I'm real kinky, so I have to be real careful that it I'm not saying I'm not a problem, bro. I'm just saying that like that's just one problem in many in my dating experience, and like it's something where it's like, and that's what the interview was talking about. Is like, can you have that be like a lifetime relationship? And I'm like, if I'm just hooking up on the apps and it's weird and it's once, maybe that's fine, you know, or like it's like a sexing buddy or something like that. But if we're talking about like marriage, I can't sustain that dynamic because that dynamic erases so much of my identity. I'm a boss, and I'm first of all, I'm a boss, right? And so it's like anything that diminishes that like reality in a connection is not a connection that's going to be sustainable, right? Um, but I really do think it's interesting, um, seeing how those dynamics are explored, and also that the interview was done by an Asian person because that's someone who was like outside of the dynamic, and like it just had like, in terms of like really opening up that flower of conversation. I feel like that guy really dropped the ball because he was a kinky motherfucker, and it's like. Like you need to be able to put your freak flag away to talk about like the actual like the actual social dynamics in earnest for a second, which I can do for 10 minutes easily.